Listen, guys, we cannot spot reduce fat. If you have fat on your belly that will not go away, that means you're not lean enough yet.
Spot reduction is a myth. You've heard that 1,000 times. It's repeated so constantly in fitness spaces that questioning it feels like you're claiming that the earth is flat. But like most things stated that constantly in this industry, the reality is a little bit more nuanced than the bumper sticker version. The traditional argument against spot reduction is that you can't control where your body pulls back from. That's largely true. Fat loss is a systemic process driven by an overall energy deficit, not by which muscle you train. Training your abs does not tell your body to specifically burn abdominal fat. That part is correct. But here's where it gets a little bit more interesting. To mobilize fat from a fat cell, you need catecholamines binding to beta adrenergic receptors on that cell to trigger lipolysis. And you need adequate blood flow to transport those liberated fatty acids away to be oxidized. If the blood flow isn't there, the fatty acids get re-estified back into the fat cell and nothing net happens. Blood flow is part of the fat mobilization equation, whether people acknowledge it or not. Stubborn fat areas, so the abdomen, hips, and thighs, are stubborn for a specific reason. They have a disproportionately high density of alpha-2 adrenergic, I'm gonna hate that word, receptors, which actively inhibit lipolysis and comparatively poor blood flow compared to areas that lean out more easily. Your body didn't randomly decide those areas are harder to lean. There's a receptor level explanation for it. The critical caveat is that none of this matters if you're not already lean. If you're carrying significant body fat and the only thing that moves the needle is getting into a deficit and losing fat systemically, then spot reduction in any meaningful sense is not available to you at that stage. This is a marginal tool for an already lean athlete dealing with genuinely stubborn fat that is resisting mobilization despite being in a deficit. Not a shortcut, not a replacement for a deficit, but also not impossible.
I tried so hard not to respond to this because people are already so confused and believe a bunch of bullshit. Let's make one thing clear. Spot reduction in conventional sense, like some people believe, does not exist, but what she's saying is technically true to an extent, primarily because the mechanisms aren't exactly clear, but yes, there is a scientific evidence which indicates exactly what she's saying. Basically, the body parts areas with increased rates of blood and oxygen supply tend to lean out faster, but underlying mechanism is still calorie deficit. And groups, the subjects in those studies still lost the same amount of fat mass in total as long as the overall deficit relative to their daily energy calorie needs was the same. There were actually quite a few studies observing this exact thing over the years. Most of them found no statistical difference whatsoever, except one recent study, relatively recent study, which was comparing basically abdominal endurance style of training versus conventional treadmill, basically lower body dominant endurance style of training, and they were comparing the regional fat loss, localized fat loss between the groups. Again, let's make one thing clear: the total fat mass loss between the groups, between the subjects, was the same because the overall deficit was the same. But they did find the subjects who were training their abs apparently lost a little bit more fat mass from their trunk, from their abdominal area, while the subjects who were using the treadmill lost a little bit more fat mass from their lower extremities, from their legs. I knew it. Spot reduction exists. Wait a minute. There are quite a few methodological flaws within the research setup. For starters, opposed to what she said, that was only observed in overweight male adults. Virtually all the subjects in the study were overweight, big time. There's another major issue or potential limitation, and that's the fact subjects' body composition was measured and compared with a DEXA scan. DEXA scan has one major flaw. It can't recognize the difference between localized water retention, water weight, water mass, and lean mass or lean tissue. Hence the pretty significant margin of error when it comes to body fat percentage readings. I could honestly dissect this, dive into the research setup, and yap about it for hours. I really don't want to do this here, but let's just say they find the body composition readings were painfully inaccurate due to that exact reason. That could actually clear out the whole discussion. There's a chance the difference was just observed in localized water retention, not actual fat mass. Oh yeah, I almost forgot there was another really interesting thing researchers brought up, and that's the possibility the individual subject fat cells distribution favored those particular study results, but it was basically just by pure coincidence. Until we get more research, more studies on the subject, ideally in a more controlled environment with better, more accurate, more precise body composition readings, we won't know for a fact. Final verdict, in general, or on general scale, most of you shouldn't even care about this. The way most people, or some people, visualize or imagine body fat, spot reduction, it doesn't exist. We know that for a fact. Fat loss is a systemic process, and as long as you stay in a calorie deficit long enough, body fat will come off from all over your body. If you're talking about nuances, minor details, as fucked up as they sound, both of them are right. Please don't get confused by this. Oh man, I'm debunking so much bullshit on a daily basis. I don't want to wage war on spot reduction again.